Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, back with another set of conversations. And these conversations are a lot more meaningful and something that's a need of the hour. There's enough noise, there's enough opinions already aired around addiction issues. And this is when we thought we really wanted to go out to the larger masses, various stakeholders, and start talking about where addiction is an illness. And we need to respect it as an illness while it's been criminalized, showcased, and as well portrayed in multiple various forms out there by media, by opinionators, and various stakeholders. So we've put together an eminent set of panelists, and while I'm proud, I'm extremely elated to introduce Ms. Soumya Reddy, our member of the Legislative Assembly, and the General Secretary of the All India Mahila Congress. To us, she is our representative. We're really looking forward to having this conversation with you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandesh, for having me here.
Thank you, ma'am. We also have our medical director, Dr. B.R. Madhukar, who's extremely enterprising and open to many views. And when we said, let's have this, all he said was, it's lovely to have conversations with various people. And when it comes to addiction or mental health, it can't be restricted to just clinicians and medical practitioners. It's important to have this conversation opened up with various sections of the society. Thank you, Dr. Madhukar.
Thank you, Sandesh, for having me, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. We also have a family member with us. For the sake of confidentiality, I would not be addressing her by her name. While she's been courageous enough to come forward and to say that she wants to voice out what it is like a family member to experience this in the first hand. While we've seen recovery in her loved one, she has stood strong as a pillar. I could actually picturize and imagine how she has held fort in many, many ways. And that recovery has been multifold. It's been long duration of a few years now. What stands out and what's the pride is when you get to know her loved one today is going through his graduation, being offered jobs, and he's able to hold on to it. What a pleasure, what a joy. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you, Sandesh. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. I'm Sandesh Cadabam, the Managing Director of Cadabams Group. I have taken fold from a generation who has founded this place with a lot of memory and close hearts to mental health. And our mission has always been to make quality mental health care accessible to many more, or rather accessible to all. And this is one front where we said we are open for conversations. I say this every single time. You are a stakeholder, you are an organization, you're an interested individual. We would love to hear from you. Mental health is the only way that we can bring about this change. Shifting our focus back, here as it is. I would play up the role of moderator. I'm not sure if I would live up in the best way, but we'll keep this conversation very light. I have a few questions on the top of my head. Dr. Madhukar, if you could just throw light on really from the clinical perspective of where and how, what is addiction? I think what is addiction to each one of us here is very different. I think that could be a good conversation starter for each one of us. What is really addiction?
Sure. I was just reminded of my medical school days, and this is a long time ago. I joined medical college in 1982, and that was the first time I was exposed to that world as such. When I say exposed, I could see that a junior of mine who used to repeatedly get admitted to the hospital himself. For what? Pain abdomen. And it took quite a while for us to understand that he was getting admitted for what? For an injection. An injection for relief of his symptoms, pain. And none of the doctors knew about it. So he was complaining of pain, and we used to get into thinking, what are the reasons? All kinds of investigations were being done. Still, nothing was found. But then later, it took a while to understand why this person was getting admitted. Now, just going back to that question, what you mentioned. So here is a person, as we talk about, starting to use a substance, okay, and then subsequently his life starts revolving around that. He wants that substance for relief of his symptoms, plus he can't live without it. The life goes around that, and there is a little bit of benefit in taking the medicine or taking the substance for relief or feeling good about, which is short-lived. But more so, it is about the negative symptoms or feeling restless, agitated, and wanting to have that for a longer period of time. So at the cost of his life, at the cost of his, say, hobbies, interests, and here this gentleman I was talking about, his medical education suffered because of that. Unfortunate, but that's what goes on in many people's life, where that becomes their preoccupation, their drive to take that substance. So it is not, see, all of us do have a cup of coffee in the morning. Okay, we all have coffee or tea, and we are happy with that, and we are able to get on with their life. But just imagine the person wants to drink the coffee all day, all day, and that becomes his only job in life. So that is where you talk about harmful use or an addiction, where a person is unable to control that substance, unable to stop it, and unable to come out of it. So these are the things which defines a person who has got into addiction or got into harmful use.
Fantastic, doctor. Ma'am, I'm sure you've heard this phrase of addiction. To you, people like us and mental health facilities are one part of the society, but there's always a view, and it's interesting to know from a policymaker like you on how do you personally perceive addiction, and when you look at it from the viewpoint of the policymaker, where do we stand today, and what are the opinions and the thoughts around addiction in that space of fear?
If you're talking about, my point of view, it may be very different from what a lot of other people think. I would start off by actually saying what a lot of politicians, general public, even law enforcers, people tend to look at people who end up, I would say, succumb to addiction, get addicted with, it ends up becoming black and white, unfortunately. And I think the whole conversation really needs to move towards having conversations about it, talking about it, and right from why this happens. And I think going back to why we're having this conversation, having to look at this like an illness or a disorder, or, just like Dr. Madhukar mentioned, like coffee.
Absolutely. Ma'am, I'm sure your views, ma'am, would be from a very different perspective. I think you have seen people around you and your loved one probably having a conversation saying, look, I'm a user of it. There's always a control level that I would use. And there's always, there would be an argument that you would have seen that it is a dependence, right? So for you, addiction might really be a very different perspective. I think for the sake of adding on to a perspective here in this conversation, do you think you have a different perspective from what's being shared, or am I reading it differently there?
I think unless you are a parent, you never, or you're a spouse, and you're facing addiction firsthand, you actually don't know.
Right.
You need to be facing it every day, because it starts from the beginning, from the very morning, and then it goes on to the night, and then you're facing violence. I mean, it's something which people who have not faced it can't even perceive. So that's why people talk about legalizing cannabis, legalizing this, legalizing that. But if they actually spent a day in an addict's house and see how the addict is behaving, then honestly, I think all the politicians, all the policemen, all the, the public will not be talking about legalizing. They will be aware of it. They will also not be criminalizing it, because they will understand it's also a disease which needs to be addressed. because the addict cannot help himself. Like Dr. Madhukar said, you know, you've been sucked into it. It's like a whirlpool. You're sucked into it. You're not able to get out. You need to lend a helping hand to pull them out. Sometimes the addict is going to resist being pulled out because he's happy inside that, because his awareness is also very limited. He doesn't understand there's a beautiful world outside. So and then he will remain there, and if who is trying to pull him out, he will try to suck them also inside. Many times the parent also gets sucked inside. And many times the parent is suffering a mental illness because you're facing this addiction day in and day out. There is no respite. It is traumatic. I mean, there is no word to explain the trauma which which the parent or the spouse goes, because you love your your loved one who's an addict. You can't let go. The society says let go, but you cannot let go, because you know next he's going to be in the gutter. She or he is going to be in the gutter, or he's going to die. So you can't. So you are there, but you can't be there because you're facing violence. Because it's like, for an addict, it's everything. It's consumed. Like doctor said, he can't stay out of it. He doesn't even care whether it's your mother or grandmother, or I mean, he will beat you up to take the money, and the minute he knows he's getting access, somebody is offering, that's it. He's going to beat you up, and he's going to break everything and take the money, and he's going to run.
Right.
It doesn't, for him, he can't see anything beyond the addiction, beyond the substance.
Right.
So I think what we need to do is to create this awareness. Please, whoever is talking about, talking big about all this and then saying, no, you should legalize, etc., please come and spend a day. And there are also adolescents, young adults saying that why this is not like, they say, marijuana is so much, it's not addictive. Tobacco is addictive. It's causing cancer, etc. So I say, like, do you understand? Why don't you come to a center and watch for a day or 2 days? Talk to the people. So why don't you face it firsthand before you talk?
Right.
So I think this is very important. If we want to create awareness, let's, I think the parents or the spouses, they need to create this awareness, and people who are talking big, I think they need to be kept inside a rehab center to, to interact. Probably they will not be talking what they are talking.
That's a very interesting view. But well, I always have this question at the top of my mind. I'm sure each one of us are asked this multiple times. Is pleasure seeking wrong? There is a certain set of population who are consumers of this. I mean, to me, addiction is a whole spectrum, starting from as much as alcohol, various substances like cannabis, opioids, or prescription drugs, and so on. Right? There's a whole spectrum. But there is a certain set of population. I mean, we all probably believe cannabis is a gateway drug, and alcohol addiction is also very, very prevalent. Now, there might be people who ask, is pleasure seeking wrong? And, is that the sense to seek pleasure, is that the reason why they become an addict, doctor, or is that one of those aspects?
See, seeking pleasure is not wrong. I was again trying to remember. Going back to our childhood days, we read about Mahabharata and all the mythology also, and where you have the use of something or the other as a substance which is identified being taken by Rakshasas and some people who don't take it, and so there is a lot of our historical way of looking at it. It is not now. It's a curious mind which wants to try something for the pleasure you talked about. At the same time, it's the influence of others. If somebody takes it, and whether he really has pleasure or not, or what he is experiencing, how he communicates to the other one. If he says that, look, you smoke and you feel real, you are in heaven. Okay, now that's good enough to say that, look, why should I be left out of the heaven? Why should I not try it out? Now, I think the curiosity has always been there in the mankind, and let's not forget it. The curiosity is, the driving force behind science. You want to try, you want to look into that, you want to look at what causes it, and of course the effects on the brain, and lots of studies go on like that. So the wanting to have pleasure, seek pleasure is not a bad thing. However, does it mean that pleasure comes only from substances? That's the question we need to ask. Okay?
Right.
So many of us are here. Does it mean that we are not happy? Does it mean that we are missing out on something? No. It's about how you communicate, how you package, how you tell the world. Is it that there are substances which probably give you momentary kind of pleasure, but at cost of what? Okay, right. Those things are conveniently forgotten, okay, which I think is very important. It's like you have a pack of cigarette. Nowadays, of course, this statutory warning has changed now. Earlier, injurious to health. Who would read that? It's in small letters and probably at the bottom of the cigarette pack. So all you have is, some film star, Western movie star going on, like a cowboy style, and you smoke. And what do you communicate? You are saying that, look, you can be or feel like that person at least for a moment if you smoke. So you are, it's a visual one, and perhaps that communication that, you get pleasure out of this is very, very strong. Okay, if you look around, there are a lot of things which are encouraging us. Shopping, for instance. Okay, you shop, and there are a lot of people who tell you they feel happy at least till the credit card bill comes. Okay, then they have to start worrying about it. So likewise, restaurants, likewise, so many other things. And I think it's a cultural change. We are seeing a lot of changes where our pleasure is not about, waking up in the morning and doing our prayers, and I mentioned about cup of coffee. It has moved beyond that now. So you have to look at lots of other things which are as a challenge to us. So I think the concept of pleasure, concept of seeking pleasure keeps changing with generations, and no harm to think that these substances do give pleasure. However, it is when you get into trouble and when you start experimenting and when the problems are there, when you look around the people who are going through, you have to clearly wake up to the reality that there are lots of other ways of pleasure than this.
True, true. Ma'am, from a perspective of, let's say, when you're looking at it at the larger, let's say, the region or the state or the country, I'm sure for people like you, people could abuse anything. They could abuse a prescription, they could abuse alcohol, they could abuse the other illicit substances. But when we recognize that it is existent in the society, it is prevalent, right? And there are opinionators who are saying this is another medium where individuals are seeking pleasure. I'm bringing this up because a lot of them on recovery and my conversations with the recovering individuals, this is one real aspect. They say, this is where I seek pleasure. The rest of my life, I'm a real good businessman. I'm an artist. I am, I'm a student. I'm able to hold up my life. What's wrong about this? But they do not realize it can really spiral bound and really choke them into it. What would your take be? I know it's a very I'd really know your perspective and wanted to throw light on what are the other agents as well.
Actually, agree with what Dr. Madhukar just shared. When you were, I wish we could have had like a young person over here, as in younger.
Aren't you feeling young?
No, as in, no, why I'm having this conversation is I was just talking to a couple of people who have been, who had gotten addicted. And so the thing is, it's like you were sharing, it's what is really pleasure. So when I was talking to this person, that person says, there is a difference between use and abuse.
Yes.
That is that person's point of view. And it was for me, when ma'am is just sharing and actually talking about her experience as a loved one, for me it's heartbreaking. Absolutely. Because there are so many thousands and lakhs of people out there and who are actually experiencing this. For a person, it starts, with, okay, let me try it out. What's wrong with it? Or peer pressure maybe. Or they are going through, I don't know, stress, or they end up getting it, something. But then it starts spiraling, like you said, and you don't know how it starts not just impacting you personally, but also people around you.
Right.
And I mean, at the cost of, it could be your own, not just physical, mental health, your own well-being, and also at the end of the day, a lot of young people. For me, my biggest concern is, not just their well-being, but also their lives. One of my own classmates, I mean, absolutely very nice guy, and we studied in school, and suddenly I find out that he just OD'd and died.
Oh.
And I mean, during college. And the thing is, it's like, even sometimes when parents find out, by the time they find out, it's just too late. And so it's like, it's really heartbreaking when you find out that lives are lost, or you just suddenly, I mean, some people end up losing their entire, impacting their own careers, like how doctor was sharing about, I think, his classmate. And I think looking at that from that point of view, I think all of us, not just policymakers, families, loved ones, mental health professionals, everybody, doctors, enforcement, authorities, I think we need to look at things more holistically. I mean, if you're talking about pleasure and addiction, for me, the biggest issue right now is also social media, which has become a biggest addiction right now.
Sure.
I mean, with not just young people, but I think a lot of us. So I think there's a difference, right? Is something good for you? Is it going to be of some use? Is it a tool? Or are we end up getting succumbed to it? Is that controlling us, or are we controlling it?
Interesting. It brings me to ask this. Well, just to throw open some statistics, it's close to about 5 to 7.5% of the Indian population today are directly or indirectly affected by addiction issues, who need treatment and help. We will post the study that has been made by the Ministry of Social Justice and in the comments and the link, so that it's quite public and it's a published data. So we're talking about that into 2 members in the family who are actually affected. That's the extent that these issues of addiction has affected the whole population today, right? While I refer that back, I mean, of course, we have one family member in this panel, but she's actually a voice of that many individuals. The reason I threw up the statistics is now, again, to recognize that there is availability of these substances, there is a growing issue. Should punishment be made part of the treatment and recovery for those who don't choose to take treatment and recovery? Or will there be a day in a country like ours, we will start talking about it? I don't know if it comes in the scope of forensic psychiatry or not, but then really at a level, if we have to address it holistically, what is your take, ma'am? I mean, do you really see it to be headed there, or should it be medical assistance first and legal action later? I mean, just those views.
I mean, I think to just kind of, I would encourage actually talking about the law right now. Okay. How is that impacting people? Right. How is that really being, I mean, if, I'll give you an example what happened a couple of weeks ago. We're having a huge pandemic. The past 7 months, all of us are suffering. How lakhs of people, I think it's, as of today, it's probably 68 lakh or whatever. And I think more than 1,05,000 people have died. But when we switch on television in the past 3 months, what are we actually seeing? Not just national televisions, but even the local ones. And it's not that, I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't crack down on drugs, or you shouldn't, but I think it's very important that we have conversations about it, and also notice the kind of conversations that media, politicians, enforcers are talking about. Look at the point of view. And I think it's very important that we have, I mean, I'll give you another example. On the 2nd of July 2009, Delhi High Court repealed Section 377. It took years and years, almost like a decade and a half of a lot of people fighting for it. And what happened after that was, I mean, a lot of people were extremely shocked to actually even acknowledge people who are gay, LGBT and everything. But I think the most important thing that happened in the next couple of years, I mean, of course, the Delhi High Court, that went back and it finally came through recently. But I think the most important for me was the conversations that happened outside, in media, in schools, at homes, among policymakers. And I think for me, the most important thing right now is having sensible conversations around this topic right now, which will lead politicians, policymakers, law enforcers to actually have a look at these laws. And is it, for me personally, I think I want to have a conversation about it.
Right.
Like having, I mean, loved ones, having people who end up getting, who succumbed into this, with this illness. How is it impacting them? And is this law, when was this law made? It's a couple of, I think, quite old. Is that really of use? Is that, are we able to, I mean, are you punishing a user and a peddler as well? Is that able to stop that person? Is that by criminalizing, are we ruining the life of that individual, of that child, of that young person? And also the biggest, I think, elephant in the room is also stigma.
Yeah. Certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Sandesh, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course,
getting into
Doctor.
that.
Just open for all, actually, yeah.
I was just thinking from what Ms. Soumya said. The lockdown period, and we all have witnessed on the television as well as read in the newspapers, how the use of alcohol, the bars, restaurants, everything had to close down.
Absolutely.
Okay? Now, there is one way of looking at it. So, you have stopped the availability and you are going to have a huge impact of people suddenly becoming sober, coming out of it completely. To the point what you were talking about, punishment as such. Now, that can be seen as a punishment. Okay? So, you are going to stop it. And what is the person? We all know a lot of people went through severe withdrawal states, okay, severe withdrawal states to the extent of people, ending their lives, okay, going through severe medical conditions, seizures, confusions, and probably, more physical problems, and trying to get it in black market, paying more money, and also just because they drink also, they are becoming more aggressive, violent with their loved ones. So, all these things have been there. Now, there was an opportunity, okay, some people thought permanently you ban.
Right.
Okay, but what did we do? Then there was again another lobby to say that you open up.
Right.
So, there is also an element of economics here, okay, to try and balance it out. Now, I am restricting my conversation here only about alcohol, but the fact is, see, we are in a democratic country. Let's not forget that. And we have a voice, okay? And people having a blanket rule that it should be banned, it should not be made available, or punishing everybody who takes it or who sells it is not going to be the solution.
Right.
So, you have to look at, fair enough, there are some states in our country also, naming Gujarat, who have done it, who have banned alcohol. But then I get to hear somewhere it still continues, okay, in spite of the ban. And there are people who we also see who have problems, okay, who continue to come. So, it not really has given you that kind of results to say that a blanket ban is going to be effective as such. Right. And in a country as large and as diverse as ours, can we enforce it? Okay, is it scientifically proven to say that, look, you have to punish this person who uses it or sells it, or how are we going to take it forward? I'm glad we are having a conversation here about it. And of course, we are raising questions, and I'm sure there will be a lot of viewers who will have their own opinion too. But the fact is, from a medical point of view, we have to look at it, it is a problem.
Right.
So we have to restrict ourselves to say that, look, it is a problem. How it has been created, there are a number of theories for that.
Right.
But what we could do is how to look at an individual level, how to help the families, as she was talking about, and how, working individually plus probably continuing to educate the people in a larger way, they will be sufficiently educated to learn what is right, what is wrong, when to say no, and how to make it forward. Otherwise, in a strict way of, like in the Middle Eastern countries, I really don't see that happening in a country like ours.
So that's a very valid point. I'm sure you're seeing it at a first person, at a first person point of contact. A lot of them who are coming to seek your help as well, doctor. I think that's a very interesting view. I really wanted this view to come out so that we have, for Ms. Soumya Reddy, she looks at it from the perspective of where two different point of views come. I'm sure, ma'am, you have a take on this, and where does punishment draw a line?
Okay, so let's look at it this way. If you want to, handle an addict, one thing that addresses or sort of keeps him in check. Politicians, policemen, even doctors may not agree, but one thing which I noticed which keeps him in check is fear. There has to be some kind of fear in terms of a consequence. You do it because as a family, it's not that you're giving them money to source the substance. I'm talking about drugs. I'm not going to touch on alcohol right now. I'm talking only about drugs. You're not giving them money to source it, but he or she has got friends who are going to be giving it to him free, or if he realizes there's an access to it, he's going to beat you up and take the money. So the only thing which sort of stops him to some extent, I won't say completely, is the fear. And the fear is of a consequence. Okay, so what is this fear going to be? The only thing right now which we can do is in terms of, I cannot call the police and then I cannot say, look, my daughter, my son is doing this, so put him in behind bars. No, that's not the case. I'm not even advocating that. But the only fear as a parent you have is, you say, I'm going to put you in the rehab. So I'm going to call up so-and-so center, and then the van is going to come. So then that fear is there to some extent. I have noticed that it comes down. Now, if you're taking it, this is the micro level. Let's take it to the macro level. I am not for criminalizing the user because he is a victim.
Right.
He is a victim. You need to recognize that. It's a disease. You need to understand that. And putting him behind bars is not going to help because he's going to have withdrawal symptoms. He may probably, connect with antisocial elements. He's going to get worse because he needs treatment. It's like putting somebody who's got a disease, no, it doesn't help. So he needs to be in a treatment center where he's receiving counseling. Maybe he needs medication, etc. So the legal angle has to look at it from that point of view in terms of, but there has to be a legal sanction where, see, there are three kinds of people who are, involved here. One is the peddler, the other is the casual user, then the other is the hardcore addict. The casual user, becomes an addict later on, probably depending on his mental composition, which doctor would be able to throw greater light upon. So you're talking, but you're dealing mainly with the addict. So the peddler is sort of supplying only because there's a demand.
Right.
Right. So
who necessarily might not even be dependent on it.
He may not be dependent.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
you have to criminalize that. The peddling has to be, there has to be legal sanction where you're able to. It's not like they put in, 15 days you're inside and then you're going, because once I do remember, if I may say so, I happened to go to the police station 3 years back to complain against one of the casual users who had actually introduced my ward to the drugs, and that person continued to give my ward, the number, the peddler's number. So I went to the police station and complained, gave the peddler's number and gave that particular individual's number. All the police said is, ma'am, I think it's not going to take you anywhere because I can catch this peddler, put him inside for 15 days. After that, with political clout, he's going to come out. So where are we here? So somebody is continuing to supply. Okay, so that is one thing I think the politicians need to see this. There's a lot of, I'm sorry to say this, but there's a lot of nexus between there are bigger fish here than the smaller fish. The smaller fish are very, very small.
I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. So, so I think
For a
there's
change, a different politician here.
Yeah, there's a complete ecosystem which needs to be addressed. So that is one thing, it has to be criminalized. If you're going to say it should not be, there should not be legal sanction, then all these guys are going to be out there selling, you know, like a cigarette, like alcohol, and then where is our society going to head for? And then you have the casual user who doesn't, it's not affecting him, at least as of now. So he thinks it's okay, hey, come on buddy, let's, you know, smoke up or whatever. So I think he is not a victim. He is actually just a user. So I'm not saying, again, he should be criminalized. In a way, he is also a victim because he thinks his awareness is not there. So he thinks it's fine. Like you were talking about pleasure seeking. He is thinking it is a pleasure, harmless pleasure seeking, where again you're talking about what is pleasure. That is something we need, that's another angle we can talk about. But I think then you're talking about the casual user. Most of the times he is prompting the addict because the addict doesn't have access most of the time because the family is closed in. So then you need to also address the casual user where you are sensitizing. Maybe, you know, you have a legal sanction where you pull him up, have a collaboration with some centers and make him, you know, stay for a couple of days and actually interact.
Yeah.
So with addicts and then, you know, with the family. So he is sensitized and he says, oh my God, is this true?
Yeah.
Now then you come to the third thing, the addict. He needs to be, understand that the law can, you know, come in. It's not going to criminalize him, but then there's going to be a legal sanction where, yes, you have a problem, you need to take treatment. So from that angle, I think we need to have a legal sanction.
Right.
Not criminalizing, seeing both the casual user and the addict as a victim.
Right.
So I think the
So you're
law
trying to
has
bring in a differentiation between the people who are the users
Yes.
and the peddlers, and
Yes.
saying, while you criminalize the people who are involved in the nexus
Yes.
at a larger level, but
Yes.
but for the users, give them an opportunity to
Yes,
recover from
yes.
there. and
Depending
give them
on
a-
whether you're casual or whether you're an addict, you need to give a different kind of treatment. And I think this is where centers like yours going to play a huge role.
Right.
Because you are the ones who are going to be the change makers going forward. You need to work to create awareness because people don't have the awareness.
Right. Trying our best, ma'am. This is one step in that direction. No, the reason why I really brought about this pleasure as a topic is, you know, while I'm quite close to the recovering individuals and the family members, you know, a couple of them did specifically mention, you know, we know you're part of this. I think we want you to talk about this. And there is this belief, you know, if you want to be creative, high functional, this is one of those agents that keep you, you know, right on the toes, keep you going. It is an argument. I'm sure we will have a few opinions around this, but let that remain there, you know. And like we referred to, you know, there's this big elephant called the stigma. Our step in having this conversation and even troubling you to travel all the way here, ma'am, is to really say that this had to be shot in our own treatment center. And these treatment centers are not closed doors. These are not what one perceives of a recovery center or a rehabilitation center, even to the days of asylum, right? So it is a space where your dignity is respected. You have space to move around. You have space to express, and you have space to recover, right? Recovery has always got a recovery rate. You know, relapse sometimes are part of the recovery. But we really wanted to break stigma, and to break stigma, what better way than to really invite people over and say, let's have the conversation here. That was one of those real goals, but, you know, maybe one way. You know, there could be other ways as well. You know, it brings me to this. You know, what changes do you think should be made at a policy level, ma'am, right now while we speak at an addiction level? Maybe I will take both their views and then come to you last. But I really want to know this. I know it's not going to happen from just one of us, two of us, but there is something that we expect at a policy level, that we expect changes to be made for addiction. I'll throw open my view. My view is this: the more you bring in, one part of it is awareness. Awareness is light-hearted. It's a choice that I could listen to you. But I really believe trainings to various sections of our society, right? Can there be a module around addiction recognition, training, psychological first aid, mental health first aid to law enforcement law enforcement agencies, to people who are glamorized, the sporting fraternity, the film. I think there's enough about film fraternity, but we have to tell them, but to the film fraternity as well. One way of for me is a step beyond awareness is really trainings, is my take. I would see that change to trickle down from a policy level. Of course, educational institution, working corporates. When is the right time to say that this is one aspect? Is my real take. I might want to elaborate a little later, but here is my take. What do you expect from policymakers, or what would that opinion be?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that all the discussions on or what's been in the sensationalized in the last few months as such, to some extent it leads to awareness and changes. Now, I understand from where you're coming from, just creating awareness is not sufficient. True, but that's as the first step. Again,
Agreed,
I go
Doctor.
back into my own field, which is the medical field. Now, within our medical curriculum itself, first and foremost, it has to be far more strongly emphasized. Which,
In the medical curriculum?
yes, absolutely. I think the psychiatry as a field, mental health itself as a field, it's only in the last few years you get few questions in the final year MBBS. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you need to have a separate paper. You need to have probably within the
very
medical
valid
profession probably an entire focus on the psychoactive substances and what it causes, and so that it's the medical field which has to be well informed to detect it, and also to suggest and get the right treatment. Let's not forget, most of the families, most of the people do get in contact with, whether it is the general practitioners or so many other people who are allied health sciences, before they get in touch with the mental health as such. So, first and foremost, within the medical field, there needs to be a lot more prominence for that. Now, continuing or sustaining a debate for long in the mainstream is not easy. Okay, nobody will be interested after a few months, and you will have something else which comes up. But at least within the policymakers, you are right. Now, you have the new or already the Mental Health Care Act, which has been implemented. The users, policymakers have to be far more well versed with that, far more comfortable, and be able to guide the people, because finally they are the ones who are very much required to work with the people, the local people. Now, as far as continuing the discussion on the substance use, I see it as an ongoing debate. Your efforts of continuing to work with schools, parents, be it at any level, okay, adults, young adults, later on also. We have people suddenly who got into, whether it is substance in their mid-40s for some middle-age crisis, okay, which has happened. So, clearly it is an ongoing one. Of course, locally the challenges may be different. If you move to a rural area, again the scope itself is different. It may not be a particular cannabis or something else, but maybe local arak or something which could be a problem there. So, it is at multiple levels, the social consequences of it, the effects on the children, the effects on their employment, as Ms. Soumya was talking about, and as a parent, and lots of things which are there. Now, it cannot be in one go that you have like a chapter and finish it. And so, we need to have a more open society to overcome that stigma, and then be able to talk about it openly, and be able to understand that these are not problems somebody else has. It could well be at your home.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we all talk about anxiety, depression now, but even drug use too. Okay.
Right.
There are issues. So, I think it is important to understand it's not a problem of the West, it's not a problem of some other country. And I was shocked recently when I was watching the TV near Chitrudurga or somewhere, acres and acres of land they were growing cannabis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, so these are things which come up where you need to address it at different levels for people to, without a doubt, act on that and probably make it very important for the medical practitioners, nurses at PHC level, wherever that even the slightest, there is always a feeling that, look, he drinks just once a day, or maybe he takes it just once a week. It's not too much of a problem. But when you look into their health statistics, where parameters, it could be very different. So we are, I think, we have to work with the different people, starting with the medical practitioners, families, colleges, school authorities. As far as the policy makers are concerned, your specific point, now they work at a very much a macro level.
Absolutely.
There are various problems which they have to address. It could be
we are just one amongst them.
Exactly. The farmers protest, bills on that, or it could be the floods, it could be lots of other things which they are, then clearly you have some designated health ministers, medical education ministers, who are the people who have to be far more actively engaged so that they can take this debate forward.
Yep.
And then work. And what I actually feel, it's not about changing the act, it is about or amending it, it's about proper implementation of it.
Right.
I'm trying to remember, if somebody is caught, say, possessing cannabis, how often do they get really punished?
That's an interesting.
How often do they get punished, and what happens? Okay, if they are probably a caution, a reprimand, and maybe they are let go. So how many cases are there? Does it mean that our cases actually are less because punishment is less, or people who are booked for those cases are less? We don't know. So there is a need to have a coordination, better coordination between all the agencies, okay, and clearly you have to have statistics right. Now that's unfortunately in our country where, identifying the problem itself is a big task.
Right.
Okay, many of them hide, many of them don't want to share that. And so you need to get proper statistics, you need to get the implementation of the act right. And as and when necessary, you have to, whatever it calls for amendment. Only thing is to make it less traumatic for the families, and certainly the person should come forward to get treatment. I keep saying that because he has to come forward. He has to recognize that and make the decision, because we all know a well-motivated person is the person who is more successful in coming out of it.
Interesting. What is your opinion on
I think
from the
Doctor
policymakers?
raised a lot of very valid points, but three things come to my mind when you're talking about policy. See, first thing is we're talking about education. Where does it all start? It starts from the schools, it starts from the colleges, and to a certain extent in the youth, in the corporate world also. So are we having mental health? He was talking about mental, giving thing to in the medical industry. But what about the schools? Are we having mental health in the schools? We don't have counselors. We don't have psychiatrists. Most of the times you find that. Correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, but I think, if, in my opinion, those who get into addiction, they have a precondition, towards addiction. Because, sorry, I need some water.
It's a question of I'll just fill in cause and effect, which is the chicken and egg situation here. So
Right.
which causes first, which came second is a matter of conjecture. Okay, perfectly healthy families, we see that somebody becomes dependent on that, on a drug. Now when we look into the genetics, when you look into the environment, you find perfectly normal backgrounds. Okay, so carry on.
So, so I think we need to have mental health. That's where the policymakers will come in, where they have to make it mandatory. Mental health should be part of every school's curriculum, whether it is a government school, whether it is a a vernacular institution, or whether it's a high-flying IB curriculum. Mental health should be part of the schools. It should be part of the colleges. And to a certain extent, even the corporate houses, a small extent. I think this should be the mandatory, should be made by the policymakers. Now, you may ask why. Simply because, like Doctor was saying, people think that it is in the next person's doorstep. It's not in my doorstep. They don't want to accept it. It can hit you. And the awareness is not there. If you're looking at the parents, even if we reach out to the, parents, they don't want to sort of talk about it. The school authorities don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address drugs or, addiction. They don't want to. So if it's made mandatory, they have no choice but to address it.
Right.
So I think mental health should be big, and also, like I was saying, the psychiatric part of it needs to be handled. Like if I take my ward, I think he had a psychiatric disposition right from the beginning. He had a behavioral problem. The school would say he's got my ward has got a behavioral problem, but they could not figure out what was the behavioral problem. I knew my ward was not normal. Okay, so I took my ward to counselor. I got my ward to do yoga, but it did not help. Supposing I had met somebody like Dr. Madhukar, doctor would have said, look, there is a small psychiatric problem. It's a genetic thing. So if you give him medication or something, it could have been corrected. So probably, I don't know.
Are we referring to enabling access?
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm saying probably my ward would not have gone into addiction, or maybe it would not have addressed. I don't know. But sometimes I feel that I did not understand the psychiatric part, because the school does not facilitate that. So how does a parent know? I used to live in England for a couple of years, and then there the teachers are trained. My ward was about 5 years old, and I was told there's something not normal. And I said, how can they be not normal? Because my ward was extremely brilliant. Now, I have not come across any teacher saying that in India, and my ward was going to some of the best schools in the state. Okay. So I think this mental health should be made mandatory by the policymakers, so that we have a psychiatric part of it, the counseling part of it that goes in, and there are a lot of other awareness which comes in terms of substances. So the students will not say that cannabis is okay, and they will understand what is pleasure. You were talking about pleasure. What is finally pleasure? Do you have to depend on something XYZ to give you the pleasure, or does it come from within? That's where your meditation, yoga, people are actually, a lot of schools are doing it. But these sort of things need to be addressed. And what are the things which we need to also go into the core of it? What is leading to addiction? It's more in terms of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. You're bored, you've got too much. So why don't you involve the students in other maybe social services, make them see other people suffering, try and contribute positively. When you do all that, the personality, see, I think the government, where the people like Ms. Soumya comes in, where you create, when you're saying mental health, it has to be an overall personality development, including the psychiatric part, including making the parents aware of what are the hazards. It's not in the next door neighbors, but it's very much inside you, and it's going to hit you. It's going to suck you in. That is very important. Second, I think the medical fraternity needs to do a lot, because right now there's a lot of myth across the world in terms of cannabis. They don't accept that it can be very harmful. And a lot of people are talking about how tobacco is fine, is bad, and then cannabis is fine. This myth, and I think the medical fraternity
it's really... It's good that you're referring to it as a myth.
I think so. I think that's where Dr. Madhukar needs to come out with this sort of thing. And the third aspect I forgot.
That's fine. We'll come back. That's all right. I think while we move on to Ms. Soumya's views,
Sandesh, sorry. You are the moderator here, but you should feel free to express
that's exactly what I'm coming back to.
I don't want you to hold back yourself.
We can see that you're holding back.
No, I would.
I know very well. When you are a youngster, you have your opinion. I want to hear that also. I want to hear that.
So I think, when we're working with schools, this incident really sparked when you were talking about it, ma'am, is the fact that, when we're working with the school programs, and we've been lucky enough, and few schools have been proactive enough to incorporate that in the curriculum, we walk out of schools where they say, can your counselors be teachers, be known as teachers, but not as counselors? We say the day you recognize them as counselors in your school, we will come back in, and many seekers for help who reach out do not know that psychiatrists or psychologists are as well trained, go through the same grind that even a cardiologist or a neurologist or any super specialist would go through in the similar training in the medical fraternity. Psychologists would go through the similar training in their master's, graduation, like any other field. And this is another science, right? And they will listen out to you, and they have a knack. Everybody naturally is a very good counselor, right? But I think coming back to where we see and where we see policies head, especially with addiction in specific. I mean, mental health itself is a very broader aspect, and addiction is one part of mental health. I think you have a view of trainings, you have a view of it being inclusive in the education system. It's over to you. What have you heard of anything else? And I'll also put it this way: if you have a certain expectation from other sections of the society like us, what would that be, and how are policymakers looking at it?
First of all, I'm really glad we're having this conversation.
Absolutely.
It's much, much needed. And I think the need really out there is to have such conversations in schools, in colleges, in universities, and like ma'am was sharing in, corporate, in the corporate world. And I think because I think the very first step is to talk about it and have different points of view. Both of you actually said extremely valuable points. I am here more as wearing two hats, one as a layperson and another hat I'm also wearing is as a policymaker. And it's been about 2 years since I've become an elected representative. But I think it's very important that we have such conversations out there. It could be in the assembly, in the parliament, in media, without screaming and yelling at top of each other, without politicizing things.
And throwing mics at each other.
Yeah, throwing everything you find. And I think this conversation, you switch on, like I was sharing earlier, you switch on the television, not just over there, even over here, even in Karnataka. It's all about, this person, that person, this actor. But I think the most important thing is it's like, for me personally, in my opinion, it was a distraction. Lakhs of farmers are protesting. More than 1 lakh people have died from COVID. And I think we need to have such kind of real conversations out there instead of, are we really going to talk about this 2 months from now as passionately, screaming at each other, the drugs problem, we are enforcing, we are doing this, we are doing that. But I think a media person came and asked me, they're doing this, what's your opinion, this actor? I'm like, what I responded was, this has always been an issue.
Absolutely.
Even when I was in college, even when I was in school, since I've heard of this. Why is that, and I remember even a year or year and a half, 2 years ago, one of the elected representatives was like, and a couple of other, their present ministers, then in the previous government, they were like, yeah, my son has gotten addicted, this and everything. And I think, why is that we cannot have the same conversation right now? And I want to talk about another instance where somebody ran into my office saying that they found people just barged into their house, both the sisters of that child, I think he's a 21-year-old, and parents, and they're not able to talk or explain. And then they tell me that he's been, the police just barged into his house. They just opened his mobile phone and they found like a little bit of cannabis, marijuana. And then what they filed in this one was they found 1.5 kilos of something, I don't remember, of cannabis and MDA, MA and stuff like that. I know I'm wearing this politician elected representative hat right now, but I completely agree with you that there is a huge nexus out there. Why is that we're having these conversations over and over again, or not having these conversations? Why is that, that this exact same thing could have happened 10 years ago? And we don't want this to happen 10 years later, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think...
yeah, I would take that as a word of encouragement now that, it's being acknowledged for, and at least people like you are hearing it out and taking it out there. I'm not sure how many hours we've spent on discussions in the mental health in the parliament or the legislative assembly. So I think it has not come in the forefront that way when it comes to mental health and it comes to constructive discussion about addiction.
I think piggybacking on what both of you said, especially you, ma'am, I think it's important that we, I was talking about LGBT issues earlier. We had a very similar conversation about, because the biggest issue is when, in 2009, when Delhi High Court, I'm going back to that because I'm trying to kind of find similarities with a few other things, and on a broader topic of mental health, that, a lot of parents and teachers, principals didn't know how to deal with children who are queer, who are LGBT. And I think, and I think that's where we actually brought in a lot of people who are practitioners, parents, people from in the education sector. And I think it's so important that, there is we have, I think, 138 crore population in our country. And I think having these conversations is so important in schools, in universities. I think having access to a person who is a counselor, a person who is, because we actually spoke about a broader topic of LGBT issues, which also talks about gender, which talks about sex education. When you make, I think we need to look at things from a different point of view. For example, when this was made, when the whole conversation about having a sex education mandatory in schools was, oh my God, a lot of people protested. Some section of the, I would say, society or, politicians protested, no, we don't talk about this, we don't talk about that. But I think when you look at things holistically, what happens in other countries? You talk about abstinence, you also give them, that, okay, fine, when you do this, you need to also have, do it protected, or this is a consequence and all of that. And I think we need to have similar conversations about mental health as well. We're talking about depression, anxiety. And I think how many people really out there tell openly that I am depressed, I have anxiety, I go to a therapist. And I think even that also applies to a lot of things, including saying, yeah, I have HIV.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is also the fear, the stigma as well associated with it, right? And I think when a child knows that, okay, it starts young. It starts young, like when you were sharing about your child, I think each and every person is different. Yeah. And I think when you actually identify that earlier, when there is a counselor available who actually also identifies, or even the child knows, okay, fine, this is not it's okay for me to go and talk to that person when I need help. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be a counselor, it could be anybody. And I think also we need to have conversations, in universities as well, in schools. And I think it's like I said, making things mandatory is also problematic. For me, point of view, like considering we're gifted with population in our country.
I think we've really, thanks to Sandesh, that we've got the policymaker here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would have really liked Mr. Bhaskar Rao also to be here. Of course, you are going to talk to him. Just, I remembered for the, even the
sorry,
LGBT...
Doctor, I'm just going to cut you short here. We may be running in, we've outshot our time, so
really?
we may be running into last few minutes of our conversation. I've been prompted, I think, twice now.
Okay.
So
I know if I spoke too much. So.
No, absolutely not. I think all of us have. So I do have some important aspect, but yeah, we'll take that as the last section. No, over to you, Doctor.
No, I was about to say that from what Ms. Soumya said about the LGBTQ, you've had some conversations around that.
Yes, yes. We work very closely with the LGBTQ community, and let's say we call that the series where we crack the cocoon and we keep it very leisure. And
one of the future sessions you can call Ms. Soumya. She will have lots to
we missed her in the last one. She was not around. So yeah. So I think there are many seekers of help and families who seek help, right? So this becomes such a social issue, right? So first they start to blame is, if there is a person with addiction issues, I'm sure this guy is from a very wealthy background, he has access to resources and that's why he's gotten into it. But the reality is that it is not so. It affects every section of the society. And the reality of urban and rural divide is also so narrow today that addiction is prevalent in the rural India, addiction is prevalent in, mainstream society. Just to bring to your reference, ma'am, the insurances still don't pay for addiction treatments today while we speak. So there is a denial of access. That's something that we as individuals, families, would probably seek policymakers to voice out. Enabling access always increases. We have more Indian mental health qualified mental health professionals outside of India than in India because there's no ecosystem or there's spaces for people to be around here. But coming back to this of when it is made a social issue, it requires, be it law enforcement authorities, policymakers, schools, working corporate, the society at large to accept. When was the last time somebody said, I'm fine to give somebody an employment after he has gone through addiction treatment or he has gone through mental health treatment? When is the last time a school said, it's fine if he is going through mental health treatment, he could continue in the school? So these are real aspects. And when can a parent really come out and say, it's not about my bad parenting, he's slipped into addiction and a dependence, right? So this is where it is. I mean, this probably, the social issues are a lot more. I would love to take this as your views, last set of views, and your concluding views as well. So we could consider a probable, conclusion here, and then we'll take that through. And I would love to hear your views on the social aspect.
You want to hear from them before I say at the end?
So,
I want to be the last person.
okay,
because
that's
I
fine.
wanna take
Okay.
Yeah,
Ma'am,
what
after
you guys
to you
are
then. Yeah.
suggesting.
I think you've raised some very, very valid points. First thing, you're talking about the insurance. Yes, this denies access to treatment because not everybody can afford a treatment, even if they want to. I'm talking about the parent or the spouse. So I think that is very important, where you recognize there is a disease. This is also a disease which requires treatment. So I think that is something which needs to be addressed so that more people have access to treatment. Second one, what was it?
Anything about the social issue,
yeah,
ma'am?
Yeah.
So
and then
from
also,
your
like you
point
were
of view, what's the
yeah,
social issue?
you were also, what I was also talking about the other time, we need to put across the statistics, that is what I forgot. I think hardcore statistics in terms of how many people are being affected, that will create a social awareness. Because if you're just saying that, unless you have statistics in front of you, so many people have got addicted, so many people need treatment, so many people have been battered, bruised, etc. This is the extent
That's 7.5% of the population.
Yeah, I mean, but much more. It should not be just 7 point, it should be much more.
That's the direct relevance, and the one that's impacting is 2 times or 4 times that.
Yeah, so basically those sort of statistics need to be brought in, and also the medical history, medical aspect of it, those statistics need to be there in order to create social awareness. Because if you don't have that social awareness, you're not even starting a conversation.
Right.
I feel that is the basis for starting the conversation, because people will think it is not my problem, it's not something, or this is not the way to look at it. So if you want to really start something, and even for acceptance, even for it to not to be a stigma, the awareness has to be created in terms of, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Sure.
So that's the way I think you need to start with the schools, create awareness amongst the public, and also there are a lot of parents who don't even know how to handle the addiction. They don't know how to see the first signs of it. So this sort
and
of
who have never even consumed or heard of these, and they're not
so
users.
I think, forget about the peddlers. I mean, this is something which need to be addressed. Then the last thing which I would like to say is, I think the police has to be fine. Right now, so many tons have been, confiscated. What was happening earlier? I want to ask. How come this didn't happen? You mean to say that he was so blind? So what had happened? So I have a question for Mr. Bhaskar Rao. Why didn't any of this happen in your time?
Right.
I would like an answer to that. Okay, and now you're talking about so much. Is this all? I think, I'm sorry, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're talking about huge tons. If you're talking about so many tons in front of the media, it's going to be much more ahead. So you mean to say, are you saying that the police does not have the power to track everybody? It does have. There's a lot of nexus between, I'm talking about the films, whether it is, the corporate houses, or I mean, not the corporate general, or the politicians. There's a huge nexus. So you need to be serious about it, and they will be serious only if the public become aware and they start asking for it. If there's a campaign, then the politicians will get serious, then the police will get serious. So I think, and again it boils down to mental health, creating awareness. That's where we need to start. Otherwise it's not going to take us anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, my take is, I certainly welcome your idea. You've had Ms. Soumya Reddy being here as a policymaker, and I'm sure she will take it from the conversation we have had here with other policymakers to make a difference. And of course, Mr. Bhaskar Rao's comments and feedback, I certainly would welcome to see that also, to see that from the police, what kind of changes they can bring in, how to tighten the laws, how to, for a more effective implementation of whatever the act, so that what ma'am is mentioning about the point on peddlers and all that is taken care of. Now, as somebody who would be watching somewhere about this program, I certainly think, look, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who are there who may be going through similar problems.
Very true.
Please, please do not hesitate to seek, because I'm very proud of with our professionals, and we have the best of environment. Whatever you choose, be it the outpatient, wanting to talk to the professionals, psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, who have the adequate skills, expertise, and who know how to help you out. So my suggestion to any family member or any person who is out there is, because of all whatever you have seen in the media, don't hesitate. Please approach, because earlier the better leads to the best outcome. So I would like to end with saying that help is out there. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us.
That's a wonderful message, Doctor. Thank you. Ma'am, over to you.
For me personally, it was really enlightening. I think this is this kind, like I was sharing earlier, we need to have such kind of conversations. And also I think we need to start translating all of this out there into action. I think it's so important, be it in, Vidhan Sabha, or even in the parliament, or even, I think it's so important to even have awareness even out to people on the ground who are working. It could be law enforcement authorities, policemen, even constables, to even, I think people, children, parents, teachers. And I think, like you said, ma'am, I completely agree. I mean, this particular topic, addiction, I don't think it should become it should not be a TRP issue. I don't think, just for like a couple of months, you're suddenly kind of yelling, screaming at each other, and then there's like victim blaming, but I think, like you shared, this is always, it is somewhere it's been kind of like an open secret. And why is that? And I think the biggest issue is also, there is a nexus. Why is that we were talking about only some particular people in the media, but not about people who are, I don't know, politicians' kids, or like people who are like, rich, who have access to it. And it's like, it's an open secret that it would be going on in parties and whatnot, rave parties. I think so many of us have heard of it. And I think it's very important that we talk about it. And like you shared, sir, it's like people who are actually listening to this, even young people, people who have loved ones. And I think it's very important for you to reach out, get help at the earliest. And I think it's trust me, even people who are dealing with it in at homes, in their own, it could be school, it could be, I know it's not related to class, mind you. I know, a 10-year-old child was selling ganja in one of the slums in my constituency. Why is that they have access to that? How did the child get
Very
it?
true.
And I think it's very important for us to go back to where these sources are, dealing with peddlers, and especially, I mean, going to the root. Where is that they have access from? And I think having very, very strict implementation of cutting down access at all levels, and also and I just hope that we're not having, at the end of the day, this is impacting a lot of people. This is impacting a lot of youth. You said, I think this is 7%.
Yes.
7% of 338 crore is a lot.
Yeah.
And I think talking about numbers and statistics is so important. That is multiplied by at least about 3 or 4. That is so many families. And that's their entire lives, their youth, their career.
Yeah.
And I think having such conversations at a very young age, in schools, in colleges, is just so important.
Yeah.
So that we actually nip this at the bud. And also, I think the biggest issue in our country is also corruption, and also to ensure that laws are also not meant to be broken, in the sense, once there is, no access, so that this child doesn't get it in the first place, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Can I add just one small thing?
Sure.
I was I was wondering, why can't we have a helpline? I mean, you are an MLA. Have a helpline for the parents or the spouses, where they can reach out, the police helpline, where they can say, look, my ward is sort of, sourcing so and so. So all they have to do is, if they share the ward's number with the police, the family would be quite happy to do it in terms of, I mean, secrecy, I mean, privacy is maintained. With the ward's number, they can easily track the peddler.
Yes.
Why can't the police do that? This is a question I have for Mr.
Bhaskar
now.
yeah.
Sure.
And then the police is saying, look, we are there. So why? It's so easy to track a peddler.
Yeah.
It's so easy to track a casual user, through the Facebook, through the WhatsApp. So you are nipping the access to it. So why can't we have something like that? This is a question I have to the commissioner as well as to Mr. Bhaskar.
Sure. We'll certainly take that back. Take that back with them, ma'am. I think while we reach to a certain level of conclusion, both your feedbacks on statistics will be taken up seriously. We will put out those statistics as part of this conversation when we air it, and we will show out those numbers. One thing I think I missed emphasizing is there is a treatment gap. While there is the prevalence of these issues, our treatment gap always ranges to 85% and above. So that means to say 85% of those people never have sought help or have had access to help itself. And I think it puts me on a note to say that there will come a time where we will start talking about mental health literacy, and we will be in the forefront to be having this conversation where it will come down to mainstream, and we will have to have this conversation. It could be awareness, it could be trainings, that is going to stay. And there will, I'm sure, I'm optimistic, there will come a time till, like the West, there would be budget for mental health. Along with the health budget, there will come a time where there will be mental health budget. We are just one organization, but I'm sure we've impacted more than thousands of lives or tens and thousands of lives. Here's our attempt to say that here we are for genuine conversations around mental health, and this time around is addiction. And I can only reaffirm the fact that addiction is an illness. Please respect it. Don't get lost in the noise that has already been done around. Anything that you have to ask will be replied. Anything that you need to know will be answered. Anything that needs help, we are always available. Thank you very much. Thank you.